She said yes under crystal lights, with champagne glasses raised high and cameras flashing like stars. I wasn't there. I watched it later on a muted screen, while rain slid down my window like it was trying to erase something too. They said she chose security. They said love doesn't pay bills. They said she was being practical. But no one talked about the way she used to trace my name on fogged glass. No one remembered the nights we counted coins and still laughed. No one mentioned how she promised, "If I ever lose my way, pull me back." She didn't even look back. I folded the invitation she never sent me and burned it in the sink. The flame didn't roar. It sighed, like it understood. That night I deleted my drafts, closed our shared folders, pulled my name out of every future she could still reach. I didn't block her. I didn't curse her. I didn't beg. I vanished quietly, because some betrayals don't need revenge. They need absence. And when she finally realized what she lost, there would be nothing left of me to return to. Before continuing to the next chapter, please subscribe, like, and comment below. Which part shocked you the most? Let me know. I met her on a day that felt unfinished. The kind of day where the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to cry or just hang low and heavy, pressing down on the city like a held breath. The clouds were gray, not dramatic, not stormy, just tired, like everything else that afternoon. Like me, the cafe was half empty, tucked between a closed bookstore and a florist that had already begun to wilt. It smelled like burnt coffee and old wood, the kind of place people end up when they don't really know where they're going, only that they can't stay where they are. I chose a table near the window, more habit than intention. Watching the street had always helped me feel less alone. People walking past with purpose. Umbrellas tucked under arms. Phones pressed to ears. Lives in motion. She sat across from me by accident. Or maybe fate pretending to be clumsy. She arrived in a rush, rain already spotting her coat, scanning the room like she was late to something important. The barista called out her name, mispronounced it, apologized. She waved it off with a tired smile and turned, not noticing me until her elbow caught the edge of my table. The cup tipped. Coffee spilled across the surface, dark and sudden, sliding toward my notebook like it was trying to claim something. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she said, panic flashing across her face. I grabbed a napkin without thinking and pressed it down before the liquid could soak through the pages. Another napkin, then another. Our hands brushed for half a second, warm, startled. "It's fine," I said quickly. Really, it was empty anyway. That wasn't true. I'd written half a page of nothing important and everything I didn't want to think about. But it didn't matter. Some things are easier to lose than explain. She let out a breath, half laugh, half sigh. "I swear I'm not usually this clumsy." "I believe you," I said. That made her pause. Something about the way I said it, maybe, not polite, not forced, just certain. She smiled then. Not wide, not practiced, just enough to soften the edges of her face. "That's kind of you," she said. She moved to the seat across from me, unsure, hesitant. "Can I dash?" she gestured. "Yeah," I said. "Please." And just like that, she stayed. Her laugh came easily after that, like it didn't need permission. But her eyes didn't match it. They watched the room even when she was smiling, drifting to the door, the window, the reflections in the glass. Like she was always measuring distance, calculating exits. I noticed it immediately. I remember thinking she looked like someone who had learned to survive quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just by staying alert, by never leaning too hard on anything that might move. "I'm late," she said, glancing at her phone. "But I think I needed to sit for a minute." "Late to what?" I asked. She shrugged. "Life, maybe." That earned a real laugh, the kind that escaped before she could stop it. We talked about small things at first, the kind of conversation that feels light but carries weight underneath if you listen closely. Books we never finished. Trains we missed because we were too busy thinking. How cities feel lonelier at night, even when they're full of people. How silence can be comforting or cruel, depending on who you're sharing it with. She spoke with her hands when she got comfortable, fingers tracing shapes in the air. When she smiled, it felt like she was giving me something fragile, something she didn't hand out often. "What do you do?" she asked. "I build things," I said. Slowly, she tilted her head. "That sounds intentional." "It has to be," I replied. "Things fall apart if you rush them." She studied me then, really looked like she was deciding whether I was safe. "And you?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction too long. "I'm figuring it out." There was honesty in that pause, raw and unpolished. "I like that answer," I said. "Most people don't," she replied. "They want something concrete." "Concrete cracks," I said, "especially under pressure." Her lips parted, surprised. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something else, something heavier. Instead, she stirred her coffee and changed the subject. Time moved strangely after that, stretching, folding in on itself. I forgot to check my phone. Forgot the meeting I was supposed to prepare for. The world narrowed to the space between us and the low hum of conversation around us. At some point, she leaned back and sighed. "I don't believe in forever," she said suddenly. The words landed softly, but they stayed. I didn't ask why. I didn't challenge her. I didn't pretend. "I don't either," I said before I could think better of it. "I believe in choosing." She looked at me like I'd shifted the room. "Choosing?" she echoed. "Every day," I continued. "Not because you have to, because you want to." Her eyes didn't leave mine. That was the moment something changed. I felt it. A subtle shift, like a door unlocking somewhere quiet. When we stood to leave, the rain had started for real. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough to soak through thin fabric and patience. She hesitated at the door, watching people fumble with umbrellas. "I didn't bring one," she said. "I did," I replied, holding it up. She smiled, unsure. "Of course you did." Outside, the air smelled clean, like the city had been rinsed. We stood close under the umbrella, shoulders brushing. She didn't move away. Her warmth surprised me. Not overwhelming, just present. We walked without a destination at first, steps matching, silence settling comfortably between us. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for earlier, for listening." "Anytime," I said, "even when you're late to life." She laughed again, softer this time. We stopped at the corner where our paths split. A red light held us there, rain tapping against the umbrella like a countdown. "What's your name?" she asked. I told her. She repeated it, tasting the sound, like she was deciding if it fit. "And yours?" I asked. She told me. It stayed with me immediately, like it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. The light changed. The moment didn't. "I should go," she said, though her feet didn't move. "Yeah," I agreed. "Me too." Neither of us did. Finally, she stepped back, rain catching the edge of her sleeve. "Maybe I'll see you again," she said, not quite a question. "I hope so," I replied. She walked away without looking back. I stood there longer than I needed to, rain soaking into my shoes, watching her disappear into the crowd. Sometimes love doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it doesn't announce itself or demand space. Sometimes it just stands beside you for a moment, quiet and ordinary, waiting to see if you'll notice. I did, and I had no idea then how deeply that choice would cost me, or save me. We grew close in the spaces between plans. Not the big moments people brag about, not anniversaries or grand gestures. It happened quietly in the hours no one else noticed. Late walks after dinner when the streets were half asleep. Shared meals eaten too slowly because neither of us wanted to be the first to leave. Messages sent after midnight that said nothing important and everything at once. "Are you still awake?" "Yeah." "Me too." That was enough. She liked stability. I liked building things slowly. Felt compatible. Felt safe. We never said this is becoming something. We didn't need to. It unfolded on its own. Like a routine you don't remember choosing but can't imagine breaking. She started leaving her coat at my place. A mug appeared in my cupboard that wasn't mine. Her toothbrush leaned against mine, accidental but deliberate. The kind of quiet claim that doesn't ask permission. Sometimes she cooked. Sometimes I did. Sometimes we ordered food and sat on the floor because the table felt too formal for what we were becoming. She ate with focus, like she didn't want to miss a single bite. I watched her more than I ate. "What?" she'd ask, catching me. "Nothing," I'd say. "Just thinking." "Dangerous habit," she'd smile. She told me about her fears late at night, when the room was dark and honesty felt less exposed. Being poor again. Being invisible. Ending up with nothing to show for loving too hard. "I don't ever want to feel small like that again," she whispered once, staring at the ceiling. Like I could disappear and no one would notice. I turned toward her. "You won't," I said. "Not with me." She didn't answer right away. She just reached for my hand and held it tighter than necessary. I told her I didn't have much. No shortcuts. No safety nets. But I had time. And loyalty. And a future I was willing to work for. "I'm not afraid of working," she said quickly. Too quickly. I don't want to lose everything again." "You won't?" I repeated, believing it with everything I had. She rested her head on my shoulder when she was tired. Not dramatically, just naturally, like gravity did the work for her. I learned the rhythm of her breathing, how it changed when she slept, how it caught when something weighed on her. I memorized those things without knowing why, like I was studying for an exam I didn't know was coming. We walked a lot. At night especially. The city felt softer then, less judgmental. She liked the quiet streets, the glow of streetlights reflected in puddles. She'd stop sometimes just to look, like she was saving the image for later. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked one night. "All the time," I said. "You?" She nodded. "I think about it like a place I'm trying to reach, not a feeling." I didn't understand that then. Sometimes she went quiet when money came up, when rent was mentioned, when friends talked about promotions or investments. Her smile would stay, but her eyes would drift somewhere else. Sometimes she stared at her phone too long, thumb hovering, screen lighting her face like a secret. I noticed. I didn't question. I thought patience was love. "I don't need much," she said once, curled against me on the couch. "Just peace. And someone steady." I believed her because I wanted to. We planned small dreams. Not castles. Not fantasies. Just things that felt reachable. A place with sunlight in the morning. A table near a window. Evenings without fear. "I want a home that feels quiet," she said. "Not empty. Quiet." "I can build that," I replied without hesitation. She smiled at that. Soft. Grateful. But there was something else behind it. Something unreadable. I didn't ask. I didn't know I was loving her the way people love home. And she was loving me like a waiting room. It happened slowly enough that I didn't feel the imbalance forming. Not at first. She started canceling plans more often. Nothing dramatic. Just little things. Work ran late. "I'm exhausted tonight. Can we do it tomorrow?" Tomorrow always came. Just not always with her. When she was with me, she was present. Attentive. Warm. She listened. She laughed. She leaned in when I spoke. That made it easy to ignore the absences. The way she checked her phone during conversations. The way she sometimes seemed elsewhere even when she was right beside me. I told myself everyone carries their own worries. One night, I found her standing by my window, phone pressed to her ear, voice low. "I told you not now," she whispered. She jumped when she saw me. "Sorry," she said quickly. "It was just someone from work." I nodded. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said. Too fast again. "Just complicated." I kissed her forehead. "We can talk about it if you want." She shook her head. "I don't want to ruin the night." So we didn't talk. We lay in bed afterward, facing opposite directions. Not angry, just quiet. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the paint. She stared at her phone. The light dimmed but not off. I wondered what kind of life she was afraid of returning to. I wondered how far she'd go to avoid it. I didn't wonder if she'd leave me. That came later. There were good days too. Days that felt solid. She'd show up at my place with groceries and an idea. Rearrange the shelves. Buy new curtains. Talk about how the light changed the room. "This feels like ours," she said once, spinning slowly, smiling. My chest tightened. "It is." She kissed me then. Slow. Deliberate. Like she was making a promise. I held onto that kiss longer than I should have. Sometimes she talked about people from her past. Friends who married well. Women who made smart choices. "She's not even that in love," she said once, scrolling through photos. "But she'll never worry about money again." I laughed. Uncomfortable. "That sounds like a trade." "Everything is," she replied, not looking up. I should have heard the warning in that. Instead, I pulled her closer. "I don't want you to trade anything. I want you to choose." She smiled at me. "You're idealistic. Is that a bad thing?" She didn't answer. The first time she didn't come home at all. She texted at dawn. "Stayed at a friend's. I'll explain later." Later didn't come. I told myself trust was built by not interrogating. By not demanding proof. By letting love breathe. I didn't know I was teaching her how easy it was to disappear. The distance grew in inches, not miles. A missed call here. A shortened reply there. Her laughter a little less frequent. Her silences a little heavier. Still, when she rested her head on my shoulder, my body remembered her. Still, when she said my name, it sounded like belonging. One evening, rain pressed hard against the windows. The city blurred. She sat across from me at the table, stirring soup she wasn't eating. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked suddenly. "Leaving what?" "This," she said. "The room. The future we pretended was waiting patiently." "No," I said honestly. "Do you?" She shrugged. "I think about options." That word stayed with me long after she fell asleep. Options. Like doors. Like exits. Like something temporary. I watched her sleep that night. The way her face softened when she let go. The way her hand curled instinctively toward where I was. I told myself love was enough to anchor someone. I was wrong. By the time she started pulling away, I was already too deep. Already building something she had never promised to stay inside. I didn't know then that people who fear nothingness will choose security over sincerity every time. I only knew that I loved her. Quietly. Completely. Without conditions. And that, I would later learn, was never the same thing as being chosen. The rain stopped sometime before morning. The silence didn't. He entered her life like an answer written in a cleaner handwriting than mine. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just precise. The kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because the world already leans in to listen. She mentioned him on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were our quiet days. Leftovers in mismatched bowls. A window cracked open for air. The city humming like it was tired too. "I met someone through work," she said, stirring soup she wasn't eating. Her voice stayed casual, but her fingers didn't. They circled the spoon too many times, as if she were tracing the edge of a thought she didn't want to fall into. I looked up and smiled. I had practiced that smile. "That's good," I said. "New connections are good." I meant it. Or at least I meant the version of myself that wanted to be secure enough to mean it. She nodded. Too quickly. "He's helping with a project." Just advice. Advice. That word would change shape later. That night, she stayed on her phone longer than usual. The light from the screen painted her face in a pale blue, making her look farther away even though she was right beside me. I didn't ask. I believed silence was respect. The next mention came a week later. A dinner. "Just business," she said, already reaching for her coat. She smelled different when she came back. Cleaner, sharper, like a place I hadn't been invited into. "Did it go well?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Then, after a pause, "He's very composed." Composed. I lay awake that night thinking about the word. How it sounded like something finished. Something that didn't need fixing. I was still under construction. He became a shadow with edges. Not fully formed, but always present. A message during our walks. A call that pulled her away from the table. A name that arrived without context and left without explanation. She never hid him. That was the cruel part. She spoke as if transparency could cancel consequence. "He's older," she said once, as if that explained everything. "Successful," another time, like she was describing whether inevitable beyond control. I told her I trusted her. I said it because I thought love required bravery, and bravery meant not flinching. But trust doesn't stop your chest from tightening. It doesn't quiet the small, animal part of you that recognizes a threat before your mind catches up. She started dressing differently. Nothing dramatic, just sharper lines, darker colors, clothes that looked like decisions instead of comfort. She wore a watch she never wore before. It wasn't expensive, but it looked intentional. She stood straighter, spoke slower. When she got ready, she faced the mirror longer than she used to. I watched from the bed, noticing how she adjusted herself not to feel beautiful, but to look credible. Sometimes she asked, "Is this okay?" And I always said yes. I didn't realize she wasn't asking for my opinion. She was asking for permission. Plans began to thin. Our late walks shortened. Meals rescheduled. Conversations clipped at the edges. "I'm just tired," she said. "I have a lot on my plate." I nodded. I learned how to swallow disappointment without chewing. One evening, rain pressed against the windows like it wanted in. The city lights blurred, turning the world outside into watercolor. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. "He offers security," she said suddenly. The words didn't fall. They landed. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were steady, but guarded, like doors locked from the inside. "And what do I offer?" I asked. The question escaped before I could soften it. She didn't answer right away. That silence, it stretched, filled the room. It pressed into my ears until I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uninvited. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the rain, looked at her hands. "I don't know," she said finally. Not cruel, just honest. Something in me cracked. Not loudly, not enough to be noticed. Just a hairline fracture, the kind that waits. I nodded. "That's okay," I said, "because that's what you say when you don't know how to leave." After that, I started noticing the imbalance. How I waited, how she weighed. Every decision felt like it was being placed on an invisible scale. On one side, time, effort, patience. On the other, certainty, money, ease. I always came up lighter. He called during my birthday dinner. She stepped outside to take it. "I'll be right back," she said, already moving. I stared at the candle melting into my cake, wax pooling like something that had tried to stand and failed. When she returned, she kissed my cheek. "Sorry," she said. I said, "It's fine." It wasn't. She started talking about the future in a language that didn't include me. Not directly. Never directly. "Some people don't get chances like this," she said once. "Sometimes you have to be practical." Practical. As if love were a budget you could rebalance. I wanted to remind her of the dreams we planned, the small ones. The table by the window. The place with sunlight. Evenings without fear. But those dreams suddenly sounded small. One night, I found a letter on her desk. Not hidden. Just resting there like it wanted to be found. An envelope with his name in clean ink. Inside, a contract. Pages of promise disguised as paperwork. She came in while I was reading. "You went through my things?" she asked, not angry, just distant. "I stumbled," I said. She nodded as if that made sense. "He's offering me a position," she said. "It's stable. Long-term." "And us?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "That's different." Different. Another word that would haunt me. I realized then that I was no longer competing with a man. I was competing with a version of life that didn't need to struggle. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being scored in silence. But I stayed. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting I wasn't enough. because I thought endurance was devotion, because I believed that if I loved her harder, she would choose me softer. I watched her drift, not away, but upward, toward something I couldn't reach without changing who I was. The crack widened, quietly, and I pretended not to hear it. That night, she slept beside me, her back turned, a small distance between us that felt larger than the room. I stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths, memorizing them like I was preparing for absence. Outside, the rain stopped. Inside, something irreversible had begun. The announcement didn't come with a warning. No call, no explanation, no soft prelude to lessen the fall. Came the way disasters do now, online. A photo filled my screen before I could prepare myself to look away. Her hand in his fingers wrapped around hers like ownership, not affection. And there it was, the ring. Caught the light perfectly. Polished, certain, reflecting everything except me. The caption was simple, almost tasteful. For security. 2 words. That was all it took to erase us. I stared at the screen so long my reflection faded into it, until I couldn't tell where my face ended and the glass began. My room felt unreal, like a set after the actors have gone home. The air was heavy, still, waiting for something that wasn't coming. I refreshed the page once, twice, as if the image might apologize and disappear. Didn't. The comments multiplied faster than I could read them. Congratulations. You deserve this. So happy for you. Strangers celebrated a future that had cost me my past. My phone vibrated. Once, then again, then relentlessly. Are you okay? Is this real? Did you know? I didn't answer any of them. What was there to say? Yes, I knew she was leaving, just not the exact date. Yes, I knew I was temporary, just not that I'd be archived so publicly. Her silence was louder than the post. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't send a careful paragraph explaining timing, or fate, or how life had simply happened. That absence hurt more than the image itself, because it meant this wasn't impulsive. It was planned, curated. I went outside without really deciding to. The night air felt sharp, like it wanted to wake me up. Streetlights blinked on one by one, indifferent to the collapse happening quietly inside my chest. My feet carried me through familiar routes, muscle memory guiding me where my mind refused to go. The bench near the bus stop, where we once shared fries from a paper bag, laughing too loudly about nothing important. The bookstore, where she used to stand in the poetry aisle, pulling out lines she liked and pretending she didn't want me to notice which ones stayed with her longest. The quiet street, the one with the broken lamppost, the one where she cried into my coat on a night colder than this. I'm scared of losing you, she had whispered, fingers gripping the fabric like I was the only solid thing left. I remembered how I'd held her then, how sure I'd been. She didn't lose me. She traded me, traded shared meals for formal dinners, late walks for chauffeured cars, the patience of becoming for the certainty of arrival. And the world applauded her for it. I sat on the bench alone, scrolling again even though I promised myself I wouldn't. The ring gleamed in every repost, every angle. It looked heavier than love, like an anchor disguised as jewelry. I imagined her smiling for the photo, that careful smile she'd learned, the one that didn't show doubt. I wondered if her hand trembled when he slid the ring on, if she thought of me for even half a second, if there was a pause, a breath, a flicker of regret, or if I had already been edited out by then. My phone buzzed again. Her name, not a call, a message. I didn't know how to tell you. I read it once, then again. That sentence was supposed to carry weight. Closure, humanity, carried nothing. I typed, deleted, typed again. You told the world before you told me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I didn't want to hurt you. I laughed, a short, hollow sound that startled even me. You don't avoid hurting someone by choosing the loudest possible way to leave. I didn't reply. I walked home slowly, every step heavier than the last. Inside my apartment, everything still looked like us. 2 mugs in the sink. A sweater she forgot on the chair. A painting she once said reminded her of quiet hope. I took it down. Not because it hurt, but because it lied. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, phone face down beside me like a weapon I was choosing not to touch. Outside, somewhere distant, people were laughing, living, celebrating futures. I thought about all the times she'd gone quiet when money came up. All the times she checked her phone instead of meeting my eyes. All the pauses I'd mistaken for thoughtfulness instead of calculation. This wasn't sudden. It was cumulative. She didn't betray me in one moment. She had been leaving slowly for a long time. Every rescheduled plan, every careful word, every time she measured instead of leaned. I had loved her like home. Steady, forgiving, waiting. She had loved me like a chapter she was grateful for, but never intended to reread. That night I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the quiet, finally understanding it. The betrayal wasn't that she chose him. It was that she let me believe I was still chosen, until the world could watch me be replaced. I didn't confront her. That was the first decision I made that felt like it belonged entirely to me. There was no dramatic phone call. No late-night message demanding explanations she had already rehearsed. No meeting in a cafe where tears would perform and words would pretend to matter. I chose something quieter. I erased myself. It started small, almost gently, like removing stitches after a wound has already closed. I opened the shared folder on my laptop, the one labeled with a hopeful name we'd picked together, back when we still felt solid. Inside were plans, drafts, budgets, notes written in her handwriting style because she liked things neat. I hovered over the cursor for a long moment. Then I removed my name. Not angrily, not with shaking hands, just cleanly. Each click felt like untying a knot I had held for too long. I deleted the shared calendar next. The colored blocks vanished one by one. Dinners that would never happen, trips that belonged to another version of us. Dates circled with intention. A future scheduled down to the hour. Gone. My phone felt lighter after that. Quieter. As if it, too, was relieved to stop waiting. I boxed the books she'd lent me. Some I had read twice. Others I had never touched because I was saving them for later. A time that always seemed just ahead of us. I didn't leave notes inside. Didn't underline favorite lines the way I usually did. I returned them untouched. Some stories don't need commentary. I removed my presence from her life the way one erases chalk from a board. Slow strokes, careful not to leave dust behind. I unfollowed, muted, archived, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. I stopped existing where she could reach me. No accidental likes, no late-night scrolling, no glimpses of a ring catching light meant for someone else. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. I realized something then, sitting alone in my room with the window cracked open to let the night breathe in. Love that isn't chosen doesn't deserve an argument. Arguments are for people who still share a future. For those who believe words can repair what has cracked. She had already made her choice in public. I was simply honoring it in private. I packed away the sweater she used to wear when it rained. Folded it carefully, as if respect might soften the goodbye. I didn't throw anything out. I didn't destroy memories. I just relocated them, from my daily life to a place called finished. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steadier. It traced slow paths down the glass, blurring the city lights into something almost tender. I stood there watching it, thinking about how rain never asks permission to leave the sky. It just lets go. That night, when I finally lay down, sleep came faster than it had in months. No racing thoughts. No replayed conversations searching for missed clues. No imagining alternate endings where she turned back. Just darkness. Deep, honest, restful. Grief still waited for me in the morning. I could feel it pacing quietly, patient as ever. But so did peace. And for the first time since loving her, I understood the difference. Peace didn't feel loud or victorious. It didn't clap or congratulate me for surviving. It just sat beside me, and that was enough. Healing wasn't pretty. It didn't arrive with a soundtrack or a sudden clarity that made everything make sense. Came in fragments. In mornings where my chest still felt tight but my feet touched the floor anyway. In nights where silence sat heavy, yet no longer crushed me. Healing was honest. I went back to work because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. At first, it was just distraction. Something to keep my mind from circling the same memories like a tired animal. I told myself I would work until I was too exhausted to think. But somewhere along the way, work stopped being an escape. It became a mirror. I noticed how much of myself I had shrunk while loving her. How many ideas I'd softened so they wouldn't sound too ambitious. How many chances I'd delayed because stability mattered more than growth to her and by extension to me. I stopped doing that. I said yes to projects that scared me. I spoke up in rooms where I used to stay quiet. I let my voice take up space, even when it shook. Especially when it shook. I started creating something real. Not for applause. Not for proof. Just real. My name began to travel without me. It appeared in conversations I wasn't part of. On documents that didn't need her approval. In places she would never enter, not because she wasn't allowed, but because she no longer fit. That realization didn't feel like revenge. It felt like alignment. There were days I stayed late. The office lights dim and humming softly. The city outside glowing like a promise that didn't require belief, just effort. I would pause, fingers hovering over the keyboard, and feel something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Pride. Not loud. Not desperate. Quiet. Earned. I learned the difference between being needed and being wanted. She had needed me when things were uncertain. When fear whispered louder than hope. When love felt safer than loneliness. But wanting someone, that was different. Wanting was choosing without calculation. Staying without weighing outcomes. Holding on even when security tempted you away. I had been useful. Now I was becoming whole. People noticed the change, though none of them named it the way I expected. They didn't comment on money, or promotions, or the subtle shift in my wardrobe from acceptable to intentional. They noticed the calm. "You seem settled," someone said to me one afternoon, handing me a coffee I hadn't asked for but didn't refuse. Settled. I rolled the word around later, alone in my apartment, letting it echo against the walls she'd never seen. I had moved after the breakup. Not because the old place hurt, but because it belonged to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. This place was smaller, brighter, mine. I stopped checking her life. At first, it was discipline, a conscious refusal. I would catch my thumb hovering over familiar apps, muscle memory begging for one more glance. Then one day, weeks later, I realized something startling. I hadn't thought of her all morning. That absence felt heavier than any longing I'd known. I didn't celebrate it. I just let it be. I started building routines that didn't revolve around waiting. Morning runs where the air felt sharp and clean. Cooking meals I actually liked instead of meals that compromised. Reading books without wondering if she'd enjoy them too. I hung a painting on my wall. Something abstract. All deep blues and fractured light. It didn't mean anything specific. I liked that about it. Not everything had to symbolize loss. Sometimes power isn't rising above someone. Sometimes it's no longer needing them to see you. I ran into her name one evening by accident. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it casually, like a weather update. A new engagement event. A new city. A life expanding in directions I used to imagine myself fitting into. My chest tightened, but only briefly. Then it passed. I realized I no longer measured my worth against her choices. Her security wasn't my failure. Her comfort wasn't my absence. We had chosen differently, and for the first time that truth didn't hurt. Late that night, I sat by the window, watching rain streak the glass. The city blurred again, like it used to. But this time, I didn't feel the urge to reach for someone else's warmth. I wrapped my arms around myself and breathed. Healing wasn't loud, but it was happening. And somewhere in the quiet, I felt myself becoming someone she would have admired, if she had stayed long enough to see him. She reached out months later, not with an apology, not with a confession, just a message so carefully shaped it felt like it had been edited a dozen times before being sent. "I hope you're well." For words. Polite. distant, safe. I stared at the screen longer than I wanted to admit. The light from my phone cut across the room, pale and sharp, like winter sneaking in through a crack. Outside, the city hummed, cars passing, a siren far away, life continuing with no regard for what that message reopened. I didn't reply, not because I was strong, not because I was cold, but because I finally understood something I hadn't back then. Some messages aren't questions. They're invitations. And I no longer needed to enter rooms where I would be reduced to a memory she could manage. I set the phone face down on the table and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Months ago, that same message would have undone me. I would have reread it until every space between the words felt like a hidden plea. I would have imagined her voice saying it softly, the way she used to when she wanted forgiveness without asking for it. Now all I felt was distance. Clean one. I had heard things, of course. Stories don't disappear just because you stop listening. They find you anyway, passed along casually, like background noise you didn't request. They said she lived in a beautiful place. Too big. Too quiet. They said her days were full but empty, planned down to the minute, yet somehow directionless. They said he was generous but exacting, protective but watchful. Security, it turned out, had a price tag no one advertised. She doesn't smile the way she used to, someone told me once, lowering their voice as if happiness were a secret. She laughs, but it doesn't reach her eyes. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. There was a time when hearing that would have satisfied something dark inside me. Some small, ugly wish for balance, for proof that her choice had consequences. But all I felt was a dull ache. Not for her, but for the version of me who once believed love could be postponed without cost. They said she talked about me sometimes. Not often. Always indirectly. As if saying my name out loud would make the regret real. She calls it a phase, someone said. A mistake she didn't mean to make. A mistake. I turned that word over in my mind one night, sitting on the floor of my apartment with my back against the couch. Rain tapped against the windows, steady and patient, like it was waiting for something to change. Mistakes happen quickly. They're sudden, accidental. What she did wasn't sudden. It was slow, measured, considered. She didn't trip and fall into another life. She walked there, one careful step at a time, making sure the ground was stable before she let go of my hand. Regret came late, and quietly. That was the cruelest part. There was no dramatic unraveling, no public confession, no desperate phone call in the middle of the night asking me to save her from the life she chose. Just silence filled with second thoughts. I imagined her sometimes, standing by a wide window in a room designed by someone else's taste. The city below her feet, the world within reach, yet somehow farther away than it ever was when she walked beside me. I imagined her scrolling through her phone the way she used to, slowly, absently, stopping when she reached my name, still there, untouched. I wondered if she remembered the sound of my voice without effort, or if she had to concentrate now, like recalling a language she once spoke fluently but no longer used. I didn't romanticize her regret. Regret doesn't heal what was broken. It only proves it mattered. And by the time it arrived, I had already learned how to live without needing proof. The days that followed her message were strangely calm. No spiral. No late-night walks trying to outrun thoughts. No rehearsed conversations in my head where I finally said all the things I never did. I went to work. I met deadlines. I laughed at something stupid a colleague said and realized the laugh came easily. That night, I found an envelope tucked between the pages of a book I hadn't opened in months. My handwriting on the front, old, slanted. It was a letter I had written to myself right after the erasure. Back when silence still hurt and peace felt temporary. I sat at the table and opened it. Inside, the words were uneven, honest, a little desperate. If she comes back, I had written, don't mistake familiarity for fate. Remember how it felt to be chosen last. Remember how quiet the room was when she left. I swallowed. I folded the letter and placed it back where it belonged. Not because I needed the reminder, but because I respected the man who wrote it. He had protected me when I couldn't. Days later, another message came. Longer this time. I've been thinking about you. About us. I hope you know I never meant to hurt you. I read it once. Then again. Still, I didn't reply. Because intention doesn't change impact. Because love that arrives after regret is no longer love. It's memory asking for comfort. I deleted the conversation. Not out of anger. Out of closure. I didn't block her. I didn't dramatize the ending. I just let the space remain what it was meant to be. Distance. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in gold, I stood by my window and watched the light fade. The city softened. The noise blurred. I felt something then, not triumph, not vindication. Relief. I had once believed that if she ever regretted leaving, it would mean I had finally won. But standing there, alone and steady, I understood the truth. Her regret wasn't my victory. My peace was. By the time she realized what she had lost, I was no longer something that could be retrieved. I had become someone who no longer waited. And somewhere out there, in a life built on promises she didn't choose with her whole heart, she would carry that knowledge quietly. Just as I once carried her absence. The night settled in. I turned off the lights. And for the first time, I didn't wonder if she was thinking about me. Because I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I saw her first from across the street, framed by the pale glow of the street lamp, her silhouette outlined against the rhythm of passing cars. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hush around me. She moved like a shadow I used to know intimately, and yet she was unfamiliar, older, sharper, and carrying a weight I had never placed there myself. She looked up and our eyes met. I wanted to reach for her, to apologize, to explain. But the moment passed like a half-remembered dream. Her gaze was sharp, almost accusatory, yet laced with something softer. A flicker of disbelief, or maybe recognition. She looked at me like I was a ghost that had wandered too far into her life and wasn't meant to stay. I nodded, brief, polite, distant. The gesture was deliberate. I wanted nothing more than to pass quietly, without disturbance, without the tremor of the past surfacing. She noticed, of course. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to speak my name, but no sound came. The silence between us was heavy, yet strangely comforting. I walked on, my steps measured, leaving behind a space she couldn't fill. Justice, I had learned, is rarely a public spectacle. It does not announce itself with fanfare or confrontation. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it is a steady pulse beneath the chest. A life lived fully without turning back. I had made my choice long ago, a quiet act of reclamation. I erased my name from her future, from every hope, every expectation that had ever tethered me to her. And in doing so, I inscribed my own story more clearly, boldly, without hesitation or apology. The night air was cool, brushing against my skin like a reminder of everything left unsaid. I imagined her standing there, alone, perhaps replaying memories in her mind. The letters she never sent, the nights she cried quietly into her pillow, the words we never shared. I had known I would be nothing more than a ghost in her life, and for once I accepted it. I thought of the little things that had once bound us. The old cafe where she had laughed too loudly, the painting she left on my windowsill, colors swirling like the chaos she had carried inside. I had kept the painting for a week, staring at it until the hues blurred with my own reflection. Then I gave it away, silently, without a word. My act of justice was not retribution. It was liberation, hers and mine. There is a peculiar satisfaction in living well while others remember you with bitterness. I walked through the city streets, unnoticed, the hum of life around me carrying on as if nothing had changed. And perhaps nothing had. Or perhaps everything had shifted in that brief, unspoken moment. Later, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened a notebook I hadn't touched in months. My handwriting sprawled across the page, a record of choices made and mistakes I would carry, not as chains, but as landmarks. The ink bled through in places, echoing the weight of decisions that had once seemed impossible. And in the margins, I wrote her name once more, not as an act of remembrance, but as acknowledgement of the space she had occupied. and the space I had claimed for myself. Sometimes I imagine she notices me in her daily life, a stranger with familiar eyes passing by, and wonders what I became. I hope she does, though not with anger. Perhaps with a quiet understanding, as one might notice the sun slipping past a window, warming a room already bathed in light. I hope she sees that I have been true, not to her, not to anyone, but to myself. That, in the act of letting go, I gave both of us freedom. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouted confessions, no lingering touches. Only a glance, a nod, and the imperceptible distance between us that was finally absolute. That was justice, the quiet kind, the kind that hums beneath the surface of ordinary life, visible only to those who dare to look closely. As I turned a corner, the wind tugged at my coat and carried a faint scent of rain, wet pavement and possibility. It reminded me that the world moves forward, indifferent to our pain, and that sometimes the most profound victories are invisible. I smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with the serenity of someone who had survived, who had chosen integrity over vengeance, presence over absence, self over shadow. And that was enough. The memory of her lingered, a soft echo, not of loss but of completion. For the first time in years, I felt untethered from the past, free to walk through the quiet streets of my life without apology or regret. Somewhere across the city she moved on as well, and I knew, with a calm certainty, that the world would bend around us both, carrying our separate stories without interference, without need for reconciliation. Justice is quiet. It is not the noise of a courtroom or the flash of headlines. It is the small, imperceptible victories. Living well, claiming your space, and letting go of those who were never yours to hold. I had done all of that, and the satisfaction was subtle but profound. I thought once more of her eyes, that fleeting glance of recognition, the way she had seen me as a ghost, and the way I had chosen to remain one. And in that final, fragile understanding, I found peace. Not because the past was forgiven, not because it was forgotten, but because it had finally been acknowledged and released. I walked on, the city lights stretching ahead, painting my path in quiet gold. Each step was a reaffirmation, a soft echo of justice rendered without fanfare. I had erased my name from her future, yes, but in doing so, I had written it clearly, indelibly into my own. And that, in the end, was enough.